They laughed at her, judged her, looked at her as if she were trash in a place where only the elite belonged. The manager smirked, customers whispered, and the security guard moved closer. She was about to be thrown out like a beggar. But they had no idea who they were messing with, and in just a few minutes, they would be the ones begging for her mercy. Watch until the end to witness the shocking moment that turned the entire restaurant upside down. The chandelier sparkled above the dining hall, casting a golden glow over the polished floors. The air was filled with the aroma of expensive wine, aged steak, and the quiet hum of conversation. This was the Grand Royale, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the country, the kind of place where dinner costs more than most people's rent. At the entrance, a woman walked in confidently. Her name, Serena Collins. Her status, billionaire. Her power, unlimited. But no one in the restaurant knew that. Dressed in a sleek black jumpsuit with elegant heels, Serena exuded class, confidence, and wealth. Yet, the moment she stepped inside, every pair of eyes turned toward her, not in admiration, but in judgment. A wealthy older woman at a nearby table whispered to her husband. "She must be lost," she murmured, smirking. "This is not the kind of place for her type." Across the room, Tom Wallace, the restaurant manager, noticed her entrance. His face twisted in disapproval. Tom had worked at the Grand Royale for over 10 years. In his mind, he knew who deserved to be here and who didn't. And a black woman walking in alone with no reservation? Absolutely not. He strutted toward her, a fake smile plastered on his face, already planning how to get rid of her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in a condescending tone. "I think you may be in the wrong place. This is a private dining experience, and we have a strict reservation policy." Serena looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I know," she said calmly. Tom frowned. Something about her confidence irritated him. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave," he continued, gesturing toward the exit. "We don't accept walk-ins, and I don't believe you have a reservation." Silence. The restaurant guests were watching intently, some whispering behind their hands. Then, before Serena could respond, a wealthy-looking woman, Helen Brooks, a longtime VIP customer, spoke up. "Oh, Tom, just get her out already," she scoffed. "These people always try to push their way into places they don't belong." Laughter rippled through the room. Serena stood still, unbothered, unshaken. But inside, she was waiting for them to dig their own graves. Serena stood her ground, her eyes scanning the room. The air was thick with arrogance, with entitlement. They truly believed she didn't belong here. Tom Wallace, the manager, placed his hands on his hips, his patience wearing thin. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now," he repeated, his voice louder this time. He wanted to make a scene. He wanted to embarrass her. Serena tilted her head slightly, amused. But before she could answer, Helen Brooks, the wealthy woman from earlier, snorted loudly. "Did you really think you could just walk in here?" she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "Sweetheart, this place is for people with class." Laughter erupted from her table. Serena let her eyes drift toward them, watching how they smirked, how they sipped their drinks, fully convinced that she was beneath them. "You're wasting everyone's time," Tom continued. "Security will be here any second to escort you out." From the corner of the room, a security guard approached. He was a large man, arms crossed over his chest, and he walked with a smirk, already assuming Serena was just another troublemaker causing a scene. The entire restaurant was watching. Some people looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Others openly enjoyed the spectacle, waiting to see this woman be thrown out. The security guard stopped next to her. "Let's not make this difficult, lady," he said, his tone laced with condescension. Serena exhaled softly. She could end this right now. With just a few words, this entire room would turn upside down, but instead, she let them keep going. She wanted to see just how far they would take it. Serena stood still, her expression unreadable, while the security guard moved in closer. Everyone in the restaurant was watching, waiting for her to be dragged out. Tom Wallace, the manager, crossed his arms. "Listen, lady," he said, exasperated. "We have strict policies here. No walk-ins, no unverified guests, and definitely no disturbances." Serena raised an eyebrow. "A disturbance?" Tom scoffed. "You're standing in the middle of my restaurant refusing to leave after I've asked you multiple times. What do you call that?" "A misunderstanding," she replied smoothly. Helen Brooks let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, this is rich. A misunderstanding?" She turned to her husband, shaking her head. "You'd think she would know her place by now." A couple at another table whispered among themselves. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Some could see that this was wrong, but no one spoke up. The security guard sighed. "All right, enough of this," he muttered, reaching out to grab Serena's arm. That's when everything changed. Serena moved slightly, just enough for the guard to hesitate. "Don't," she said, her voice calm but firm. There was something about the way she said it, something in her tone, in her presence, that made the security guard hesitate. It was a warning. Tom narrowed his eyes. "Who do you think you are?" Serena took a deep breath and smiled slightly. "You'll find out soon enough." A waiter, who had been silently watching from the side, quickly stepped forward. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting at his apron. "Sir," he said, directing his voice toward Tom, I think you should check the reservation list again." Tom snapped his head toward him, irritated. "And why would I do that?" The waiter swallowed hard. "Because I just checked it and, His eyes flickered to Serena. "She's on the list." Tom froze. The restaurant fell silent. Helen's smirk disappeared. The security guard lowered his hand. "What?" Tom asked, his voice suddenly quieter. The waiter nodded quickly. "She's actually at the top of the list." A strange, tense energy spread through the room. Serena watched as the reality of the situation finally started to sink in. Tom blinked, his face growing pale. "You must be mistaken," he said, his voice forced. "She can't be—" Serena stepped forward. "Oh, I am," she interrupted. "And not just any guest." Tom swallowed hard, his confidence crumbling. "I own this restaurant." Silence. Helen's fork clattered onto her plate. A man at a nearby table coughed awkwardly. Someone gasped. Tom staggered back slightly. What?" Serena looked around the room, taking in the stunned expressions. "Yes," she said, "I own the Grand Royale, and I've been standing here, listening to how you treat people based on nothing but your own assumptions." She crossed her arms. "And I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed." Tom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He turned frantically toward the security guard, but the man had already taken 2 steps back. Helen Brooks' face was red with embarrassment. She reached for her glass, her hands trembling. Serena exhaled slowly. "I was willing to see how far you would take this," she continued, her voice steady. "And you went all the way." Tom shook his head rapidly. "Ms. Collins, there must have been a mix-up. Serena held up her hand, silencing him. "You'll be hearing from me soon, Mr. Wallace." The room was completely still. No one dared to say a word. Serena glanced around, then turned toward the exit. But before she left, she paused, looking over her shoulder. "Oh," she added, "and to all of you who just sat here and watched." Her eyes scanned the room. "You should be ashamed." She walked toward the door. This time, no one tried to stop her. Tom Wallace stood frozen, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. The elegant, confident woman he had just tried to throw out wasn't some nobody. She was the owner of the Grand Royale. Helen Brooks, the wealthy woman who had mocked Serena so openly, suddenly looked panicked. She started, but no words came out. Serena let the silence hang for a moment. She watched them squirm, fidget, and shift uncomfortably in their seats. Tom, still in shock, tried to salvage what was left of his dignity. "Ms. Collins, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice suddenly much softer, much more careful. "If I had known—" "If you had known what?" Serena interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Tom swallowed hard. "If I had known who you were, I never—" Serena let out a small, humorless laugh. "That's exactly the problem, Tom," she said, her voice razor-sharp. The entire restaurant watched in silence. "Let me be clear," she continued, stepping closer. "You didn't refuse me service because I didn't have a reservation. You didn't kick me out because I was causing a scene. You wanted me gone because you looked at me and decided right then and there that I didn't belong." Helen Brooks lowered her gaze, her hands shaking as she reached for her napkin. Serena let the weight of her words settle over the room. Tom, sweating now, tried again. I assure you that was not my intention." "Wasn't it?" Serena challenged, crossing her arms. "Because you had no problem humiliating me in front of your staff, your customers, and your security. You didn't even hesitate." Tom glanced around desperately, as if searching for someone to rescue him. But there was no one. Even the security guard, who had once been so eager to escort Serena out, had taken a step back, distancing himself from Tom. Helen, her face red, finally spoke. "Ms. Collins, we—" She gestured toward her husband, who was avoiding eye contact. We didn't realize—" "You didn't realize," Serena repeated, tilting her head. "Didn't realize what?" Helen clutched her pearls. "That you were important." Serena let out a slow breath. "And tell me, Helen," she said, her voice softer but no less powerful, "should I have to be important for you to treat me with respect?" Helen's face drained of color. No one spoke. Not a single person in the restaurant dared to make a sound. Serena turned her attention back to Tom. "You know," she said, shaking her head, "I've spent years building a business that represents excellence. I pay top salaries. I provide the best service. I expect my staff to uphold the highest standards of hospitality." She stared directly into his eyes. "And you," she continued, "you represent everything I despise in this industry." Tom swallowed. His hands were shaking now. I can fix this," he blurted out. "I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." Serena stared at him for a long moment. Then, very calmly, she said, "You're fired." A gasp rippled through the room. Tom staggered back, his face contorting in shock. "Miss Collins, please, You should have thought about that before treating me and likely others like second-class citizens," Serena said simply. "You no longer work for the Grand Royale." Helen Brooks' jaw dropped open. The staff members exchanged wide-eyed looks, some of them barely suppressing smirks. Tom looked desperate now. "Please, Ms. Collins," he pleaded, his arrogance gone. I need this job. I made a mistake, but I can change." Serena exhaled sharply. You know, she mused, I'd like to believe that people can change, but I don't run my business on wishes and maybes. I run it on results. And as of tonight, Tom, you failed. Tom's shoulders sagged. His entire world had just crumbled in a matter of minutes. Serena turned toward the rest of the restaurant. As for the rest of you, she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, I hope you remember this night, not just because of what happened to Tom. She glanced at the former manager, who looked like he was about to collapse, but because of what it means. She gestured to the restaurant staff. These people work hard every day to make the Grand Royale one of the finest establishments in the world. And from now on, I expect excellence not just in service, but in humanity. She turned to Helen Brooks, whose cheeks were burning with humiliation. And you, Helen? Serena said with a small smirk. I hope the next time you look at someone, you see them for who they are, not just for who you think they should be. Helen nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact. Serena took a deep breath, then walked toward the exit. This time, no one dared to stop her. As Serena stepped out of the Grand Royale, she didn't feel anger. She felt clarity. She had won today, but this wasn't just about one night, one restaurant, or one group of ignorant people. This was about changing the way the world saw power, respect, and equality. Serena knew that for every moment like this, there were countless others happening every day, behind closed doors, in boardrooms, in high-end establishments where people like her were dismissed before they even spoke. And that's why she wouldn't stop. Her success wasn't just about owning businesses. It was about owning her place in the world and making sure others had the chance to do the same. Because for her, justice wasn't just about one victory. It was a responsibility. It was a way of life. And this was only the beginning. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories like this one. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and join me as we uncover more tales of resilience, justice, and redemption. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.